The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Johnson City, Texas, as Zara Jennings clutched her medical bag and faced the angry mob. It was 1876, and the crowd that had gathered outside her small clinic wasn't there for healing. They were there to drive her out of town for good. "We don't need your kind here," Sheriff Dawson bellowed, his handlebar mustache quivering with each word. "A woman doctor ain't natural. You've brought nothing but trouble since you arrived." Zara stood her ground, her chestnut hair escaping its pins in the hot Texas wind. At 26, she'd faced worse than small-town prejudice, but the sight of nearly 30 townsfolk with torches and angry faces made her stomach clench. "I've helped your children, your wives," she argued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Mr. Thompson, I delivered your son just last week." Thompson looked away, ashamed but unwilling to stand against the crowd. "You killed the mayor's wife," someone shouted from the back. "She was dying before I arrived," Zara countered. "The childbirth was too difficult enough." Sheriff Dawson raised his hand. "The town council's decided. You've got until sundown to pack your things and get out of Johnson City. For good." They gave her 1 hour, barely enough time to gather her most precious belongings and medical supplies. With tears threatening but refused, Zara loaded her wagon with trembling hands. Her dream of establishing a proper medical practice, where women could be treated with dignity, lay in ruins after just 6 months. As the last rays of daylight faded from the sky, Zara snapped the reins, and her old mare pulled the wagon down the main street. The townsfolk had gathered to watch her departure, their faces a mixture of righteousness, uncertainty, and in some cases, genuine regret. The road out of Johnson City stretched before her, a dusty ribbon disappearing into the gathering darkness. She had no destination in mind. Perhaps Austin or San Antonio would be more accepting of a female physician. Somewhere, someone would give her a chance. She'd traveled barely a mile when she saw the silhouette ahead, a lone rider sitting motionless on horseback, directly in her path. Zara slowed the wagon, her heart hammering. Bandits weren't uncommon on these roads, and a woman traveling alone made an easy target. As she drew closer, the figure became clearer in the moonlight. A tall man atop a massive black stallion, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. A long duster coat hung from broad shoulders, and the glint of a star on his chest caught what little light remained. Zara pulled her mare to a stop, keeping a careful distance. "I don't want any trouble," she called, her right hand inching toward the small derringer hidden in her skirts. The man said nothing. He simply sat there, blocking the road, studying her with an intensity she could feel even in the darkness. "Please," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm just passing through." The man nudged his horse forward until he was alongside her wagon. Up close, she could see his face, better weathered and tan, with several days' worth of stubble and eyes the color of a storm cloud. A long scar ran from his temple to his jaw, giving him a fearsome appearance. He regarded her silently for what felt like an eternity. Then, without warning, he turned his horse to face the direction she'd come from. 3 riders appeared in the distance, their torches like angry fireflies in the Texas night. "There she is," Zara recognized Sheriff Dawson's voice. The man alongside her wagon finally spoke, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder. "Go back to town, Sheriff." The approaching riders slowed, clearly surprised to find someone with her. "This ain't your business, Preston," the sheriff called. "The council voted. She's to leave Johnson City and never return." Preston. Zara committed the name to memory, watching as the man's posture stiffened slightly. "She stays here with me." His voice was quiet but carried across the distance with unmistakable authority. Sheriff Dawson and his deputies approached cautiously. "Now listen here, Quinn. You might be a Texas Ranger, but you don't get to overturn town decisions. Preston Quinn, a Texas Ranger." Zara had heard whispers about him during her time in Johnson City, a man who rarely came to town, who spoke even less than he appeared, whose reputation inspired both respect and fear throughout the county. "The lady didn't kill anyone," Quinn stated flatly. "The mayor's wife was going to die no matter who attended her," Quinn interrupted. "Doc Williams said as much before he passed." The revelation sent a murmur through the small group of deputies. Zara's eyes widened. No one had told her that the previous doctor had made such an assessment. "The mayor's grieving," Dawson insisted. "He needs someone to blame." "Not her." Quinn's hand moved slightly, revealing the holstered Colt at his side. It wasn't a threatening gesture, merely a reminder of its presence. An uncomfortable silence settled over the scene. Even in the dim light, Zara could see the indecision on the sheriff's face. "We can't just—" "You can," Quinn interrupted again. "And you will. The lady stays. My ranch needs a doctor, and she's now employed there." Zara opened her mouth to object. She hadn't agreed to any such arrangement, but thought better of it. This stranger was offering her protection, however unexpected. Sheriff Dawson seemed to battle with himself before finally nodding curtly. "Your ranch is your business, Quinn." "But the town will manage," Quinn said, "as it always has." With visible reluctance, the sheriff and his deputies turned their horses around and began the ride back to Johnson City. Zara watched them go, hardly believing what had just happened. When they were out of earshot, she turned to the silent ranger beside her. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn, but I never agreed to—" "You don't have to stay," he said, finally turning those storm cloud eyes fully toward her. "But you can't go back to Johnson City tonight, and the next town is 30 miles away. My ranch is 5 miles down this road. You can decide your next move in the morning." His logic was sound, and Zara found herself nodding. "Very well." Without another word, Quinn urged his stallion forward, leading the way down the moonlit road. Zara followed, wondering what kind of man would stand against an entire town for a stranger. The ride to Quinn's ranch passed in silence. Zara had attempted conversation twice, only to receive monosyllabic responses that discouraged further efforts. The man was as taciturn as the rumors suggested. Rounding a bend in the road, Quinn's property came into view. In the moonlight, Zara could make out a substantial ranch house, a large barn, and several outbuildings, all well-maintained, which surprised her. Most bachelors she'd encountered in the West barely kept their dwellings habitable. As they approached the main house, a lantern flared to life on the porch, revealing an elderly Mexican man with a friendly face. "Miguel," Quinn acknowledged with a nod. "Prepare the guest room." Miguel's eyes widened at the sight of Zara, but he recovered quickly. "She, Senor Quinn." He disappeared into the house, leaving the door ajar. Quinn dismounted and approached Zara's wagon. "Miguel will show you to your room. You can bring your medical supplies in tomorrow." "Mr. Quinn," Zara began, finding her voice, "while I appreciate your intervention, I can't simply become your ranch doctor. I don't know you or what you expect in return for—" "I expect nothing," he interrupted, those storm cloud eyes flashing. "The offer is genuine. My ranch hands have to ride 30 miles for medical attention. Having a doctor here would be convenient. And the town, they won't trade with you if you harbor me." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The town needs my business more than I need theirs." With that, he took the reins of her wagon horse and helped her down, his touch brief and impersonal. Up close, Zara noticed details she'd missed before: a second, smaller scar near his collar, the faint scent of leather and sage, the slight limp as he led her to the house. Miguel reappeared, beaming warmly. "This way, señorita. I have prepared a room for you." Zara followed him into the house, struck by the unexpected comfort of the interior. The furnishings were masculine but thoughtfully chosen, a far cry from the sparse accommodations she'd imagined. Señor Quinn's mother had fine taste, Miguel explained, noting her surprise. He has changed nothing since she passed. The guest room was simple but clean, with a large bed, a dresser, and a washstand with fresh water. A small vase of wildflowers sat on the bedside table, Miguel's touch, she suspected, not Quinn's. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "Breakfast is at sunrise," Miguel informed her. "The señor rises early." After Miguel left, Zara sat on the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of the evening's events. Just hours ago, she'd been forced from her home and practice. Now she was in the house of a stranger who'd appointed himself her protector. Preston Quinn was a mystery, taciturn, imposing, and yet, in his own way, gallant. Why would such a man, one who clearly valued solitude, invite a stranger into his home? Was it truly just for the convenience of having a doctor nearby? These questions followed her into a restless sleep, where she dreamed of angry mobs and silent guardians with storm cloud eyes. The aroma of coffee and bacon woke Zara just before dawn. She dressed quickly in one of the few dresses she'd managed to pack, a simple blue calico that had seen better days. After washing her face and pinning her hair as neatly as possible, she made her way toward the smell of breakfast. The ranch house was larger than it had appeared in the darkness. A central living area opened to a dining room on one side and what appeared to be a study on the other. The kitchen, where she found Miguel bustling about, was spacious and well-equipped. "Good morning, señorita," he greeted cheerfully. "The señor is already out checking the herd. He will return soon for breakfast. May I help with anything?" Zara offered, unused to being waited upon. Miguel looked scandalized. "No, no, you are our guest." "I'm hardly that," she replied, taking a seat at the kitchen table instead of the more formal dining room. "I was thrust upon Mr. Quinn by circumstance." Miguel's expression softened as he placed a cup of coffee before her. "Perhaps, but the señor does not offer his home lightly. If he invited you to stay, he meant it." The back door opened, and Preston Quinn entered, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. His hair, a dark brown that bordered on black, was slightly damp with morning sweat. He nodded to Zara but addressed Miguel. "Jackson's wife had the baby," he said. "Both doing fine, but they could use a doctor's visit when convenient." He directed this last part to Zara, finally meeting her eyes. In the morning light, she could see that his eyes weren't simply gray, they had flecks of blue in them, like a stormy sky with breaks of clear weather. "I'd be happy to check on them," she replied, surprised by the immediate opportunity to be useful. "Though I should be clear about my situation, Mr. Quinn. I'm not a formally educated physician. I apprenticed with a doctor in Boston for 5 years before coming west." Quinn took the coffee Miguel offered him and leaned against the counter. "Can you set bones, stitch wounds, deliver babies, and manage fevers?" "Yes, of course. That's more than we've had access to without a full day's ride. Your credentials don't concern me." His matter-of-fact assessment was refreshing after months of suspicion in Johnson City. There, her lack of formal medical school education, impossible for most women to obtain, had been a constant source of criticism. Miguel served a hearty breakfast of bacon, eggs, and biscuits. To Zara's surprise, Quinn joined her at the kitchen table rather than using the dining room. "I've had your things brought in from the wagon," he said between bites. "Miguel put your personal items in your room." The medical supplies are in the small office next to it. I thought you might want to organize them yourself." "That was thoughtful, thank you." Zara studied him as they ate. Despite his imposing presence, there was something almost shy about the way he avoided prolonged eye contact. "May I ask why you intervened last night, Mr. Quinn?" He took his time answering, finishing his coffee before responding. "The town was wrong. Many people thought so, but you were the only one willing to stand against them." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "I don't much care what people think." "Clearly," she said with a small smile. "Still, it was a risk. Sheriff Dawson seemed quite unhappy with your interference. Dawson and I have an understanding." Something in his tone suggested there was history there, but he offered no elaboration. After breakfast, Quinn showed her to the small office where her medical supplies had been placed. The room was perfect for a modest practice: a large desk, shelves for medicines, and a sturdy examination table. "This was my father's office," Quinn explained. "He kept the ranch accounts here. It's been empty for years." "It's perfect," Zara said, already mentally arranging her supplies. "But Mr. Quinn, I still haven't agreed to stay permanently. I'm grateful for your hospitality, but the offer stands," he interrupted. "Stay a week, see if it suits you. If not, I'll personally escort you to wherever you wish to go next." It was a fair proposition, and Zara found herself nodding. "A week, then, and I insist on earning my keep by tending to your ranch hands and their families." "Agreed." A ghost of a smile touched his lips again, transforming his severe features for just a moment. "Jackson's place is 2 miles east. Miguel can take you after you've settled in." With that, he left her to organize her new office, his boots echoing down the hallway. True to his word, Miguel drove Zara to the Jackson homestead later that morning. Mrs. Jackson had indeed delivered a healthy baby boy, and while both mother and child were doing well, Zara was glad to check on them. The young mother's gratitude was overwhelming, especially when Zara showed her better techniques for nursing and soothing the colicky infant. Over the next few days, word spread among the ranch hands and their families that a doctor was available at the main house. Zara found herself busy with a steady stream of patients' minor injuries, childhood illnesses, and preventative care that had been long neglected. Quinn kept to himself, often leaving before dawn and returning after dark. When their paths did cross, he was unfailingly polite but maintained his distance. Miguel, however, was a fountain of information about the taciturn rancher. Senor Quinn's father was one of the first settlers in this region, Miguel told her one evening as they prepared supper together. "A hard man, but fair. His mother was from Boston, a schoolteacher who came west for adventure and found love instead." That explains the books. Zara had noted the extensive library in the study. "And Mr. Quinn's education. He speaks more properly than most men I've encountered in the West." Miguel nodded. The senora insisted her son receive a proper education. He attended university in St. Louis for 2 years before his father's illness called him home. "And the Texas Rangers?" Zara asked, recalling the sheriff's reference. "Ah, that." Miguel's expression grew more serious. "After his parents died, his father of heart failure, his mother of grief soon after the senor joined the Rangers. For 5 years, he tracked the worst criminals across Texas. They say he never failed to bring in his man." "What happened?" Zara sensed there was more to the story. Miguel hesitated. "It is not my place to say, senorita. Some wounds heal slowly, even for the strongest men." The mystery of Preston Quinn deepened. Zara found herself watching him when they shared meals, or passed in the hallway, the careful way he moved, favoring his left leg slightly, the vigilance in his eyes as though always expecting trouble, the gentleness he showed to his horses, contrasting with his otherwise stoic demeanor. On her 5th day at the ranch, Zara was organizing her medicines when a commotion outside drew her attention. Rushing to the window, she saw several riders approaching at high speed. One man was slumped over his saddle, clearly injured. She hurried outside as the riders reached the house. Quinn was already there, helping the injured man down from his horse. "Snake bite," one of the ranch hands explained. "Water moccasin got him while we were checking the South Creek." The injured man, whom Zara recognized as Thomas, one of the younger ranch hands, was pale and sweating profusely. The bite on his forearm was swollen and angry with 2 distinct puncture marks. "Get him inside," Zara directed. "Into my office." Quinn lifted the young man as if he weighed nothing, carrying him swiftly into the house. Zara followed, already mentally cataloging what she would need. "How long ago?" she asked as Quinn laid Thomas on the examination table. 20 minutes, one of the other ranch hands answered. "Maybe 30. We came straight here." Zara cut away the sleeve to better access the wound. "Miguel, I need hot water and clean cloths. And my medicine bag, the blue one." Quinn lingered at the edge of the room as she worked, his face impassive but his eyes missing nothing. Zara cleaned the wound, applied a poultice of herbs she'd prepared specifically for snake bites, and administered a tincture to help with the pain and swelling. "He'll need to rest here," she said when she'd finished. "The next few hours are critical. I'll need to monitor him closely." The other ranch hands left to return to their duties, but Quinn remained. "What else do you need?" he asked quietly. "Fresh cold water for compresses," Zara replied, placing a hand on Thomas's forehead. "And someone to help me watch him through the night." "I'll stay," Quinn said simply, and he did. As evening fell and turned to night, Preston Quinn sat in a chair in the corner of the office, a silent presence as Zara tended to the feverish young man. Occasionally, he would rise to fetch fresh water or help move Thomas when needed, but mostly he watched not just the patient, but Zara as well. Around midnight, Thomas's fever broke and his breathing became more regular. Zara sat back in her chair, exhaustion evident in the slump of her shoulders. "You should rest," Quinn said, speaking for the first time in hours. "I'll watch him." "I'm fine," she insisted, though her heavy eyelids betrayed her. Quinn moved his chair beside hers. "Sleep, Dr. Jennings, just for an hour. I'll wake you if anything changes." Perhaps it was the fatigue or the unexpected gentleness in his voice, but Zara found herself nodding. She closed her eyes, intending only to rest them for a moment. When she woke, soft morning light was filtering through the office window. She was still in her chair, but someone had placed a blanket over her. Thomas was sleeping peacefully on the examination table, his color much improved. Quinn was still there, his vigilance unbroken. Their eyes met across the room, and for once he didn't look away. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded once. "You saved his life." "We both did." She straightened, shaking off the last vestiges of sleep. "He might have died if they'd had to take him all the way to town." Something flickered in Quinn's eyes, satisfaction, perhaps, or vindication. "This is why I asked you to stay." The simple statement carried weight, an acknowledgement that her presence had value beyond convenience. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Zara felt truly welcome. Thomas recovered quickly over the next 2 days, and by the end of the week, Zara had agreed to stay. He was well enough to return to his own quarters, with strict instructions to rest for several more days. The evening of her 7th day at the ranch, Zara found Quinn in his study reviewing ranch accounts. She knocked softly on the open door. "Mr. Quinn, may I speak with you?" He looked up, setting aside his papers. "Of course." Zara entered the room, suddenly nervous. "My week is up tomorrow." Quinn's expression remained neutral, but his knuckles whitened slightly as he gripped the edge of his desk. "And you've made a decision." "I'd like to stay," she said, "if the offer still stands." The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. "It does." "I have conditions," Zara continued, finding her confidence. "I want to establish a proper practice here, not just for your ranch hands, but for anyone in the area who needs medical attention." "Agreed. And I'll need supplies, medicines, bandages, instruments I couldn't bring with me from town." Quinn nodded. "Make a list. I'll have everything brought from San Antonio." "There's one more thing." Zara hesitated. "I want to be clear about my position here. I'm not seeking charity or protection, Mr. Quinn. I want to be your partner in this endeavor, a respected physician who happens to operate from your property." Quinn studied her for a long moment, his storm cloud eyes unreadable. "Is that what you think this is? Charity?" "I don't know what this is," she admitted. "You've barely spoken to me in a week, yet you've provided everything I could need. You stood against your neighbors to bring me here, but I still don't understand why." Quinn rose from his desk and crossed to the window, looking out at the Texas evening. "My mother died because there was no doctor within 30 miles, he said quietly. "By the time we got her to town, the pneumonia had taken too firm a hold." Zara remained silent, recognizing the rare confidence for what it was. "When I heard Johnson City had run out their only doctor, a competent one by all accounts, because she was a woman." He shook his head. "It seemed wasteful, foolish." "So it was practicality," Zara said, trying to mask her disappointment. Quinn turned from the window, his gaze direct. "It was justice. You deserved better than what they gave you." The simple declaration warmed something in Zara's chest. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn." "Preston," he corrected, "if we're to be partners." "Preston," she repeated, the name feeling strangely intimate on her tongue. "And I'm Zara." A small smile, the first real one she'd seen, touched his lips. "Welcome to the Quinn Ranch, Dr. Zara Jennings." In the weeks that followed, Zara transformed the small office into a proper medical practice. Preston kept his word, having supplies delivered from San Antonio, and even offering one of the ranch hands, a skilled carpenter named Edwards, to build additional shelving and a proper waiting area on the porch. Word spread beyond the ranch, and soon Zara was seeing patients from smaller homesteads and farms within a 10-mile radius. Most paid what they could: eggs, milk, occasionally cash, but she turned no one away, regardless of their ability to pay. Preston remained a mystery in many ways. He would disappear for days on ranger business, returning dusty and sometimes injured, accepting Zara's medical attention with stoic gratitude. Other days, he worked alongside his men, mending fences or moving cattle, coming to dinner with sunburned cheeks and calloused hands. Yet there were moments, brief, unexpected interactions that suggested depths beneath his taciturn exterior. The book of poetry she found left outside her door after mentioning she missed reading. The wild roses he brought back from a ride, casually claiming Miguel had requested them for the table. The way he listened, truly listened, on the rare occasions when they sat together in the evening and she spoke of her life before Johnson City. One such evening, nearly 2 months after her arrival, they sat on the porch after dinner. The summer heat had given way to a pleasant autumn coolness, and the stars spread across the Texas sky like diamonds on black velvet. "Why medicine?" Preston asked suddenly. Zara looked over at him, surprised by the personal question. "My father was a physician," she explained. "He had no sons, so he taught me instead. It scandalized our neighbors in Boston, but he didn't care. He sounds like a brave man." "He was." Zara smiled at the memory. "He died when I was 19, typhoid. I'd already been his apprentice for 5 years by then." "And you came west afterward?" She nodded. I tried to maintain his practice in Boston, but no one would see a female physician there. I thought the West might be different, more accepting of unconventional ideas. Was it? There was genuine curiosity in his voice. Sometimes. I worked in Denver for a while, then a small mining town in Colorado. Johnson City seemed promising until... She trailed off, not wanting to revisit those painful memories. Preston was quiet for a moment. "What happened with the mayor's wife?" he finally asked. "If you don't mind telling me." Zara sighed. "She was in labor for 2 days before they called me. By then, it was too late. The baby was positioned wrong, and she was exhausted and feverish. I tried everything I knew, but I couldn't save either of them, and the town blamed you." "The mayor did," she corrected. "He was grieving and needed someone to hold responsible. The town followed his lead." Preston's jaw tightened. "Cowards. Not all of them," Zara said gently. "Some were kind to me, just afraid to show it publicly." They fell into a comfortable silence, watching as a shooting star streaked across the night sky. "I never thanked you properly," Zara said after a while, "for what you did that night." Preston's eyes remained on the stars. "You've thanked me by staying, by helping my people." "Is that all they are to you?" "Your people?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He looked at her then, something vulnerable flickering in his storm cloud eyes. "No," he said softly, "not all of them." The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken meaning. Then Miguel called from inside about a telegram that had arrived, and the spell was broken. The next morning, Preston was gone before sunrise. "Ranger business," Miguel explained. Zara tried not to feel disappointed, telling herself their conversation had meant nothing special. 3 days passed with no word from him. Zara kept busy with patients and helped Miguel prepare for the upcoming Harvest Festival, an annual tradition at the ranch where all the workers and their families gathered to celebrate the end of summer. On the 4th day, as Zara was examining a ranch hand's sprained wrist, she heard horses approaching. Looking out the window, she saw Preston returning, but he wasn't alone. Sheriff Dawson and 2 deputies rode with him, their expressions grim. Zara quickly finished bandaging the wrist and stepped onto the porch as the riders dismounted. Preston's face was unreadable as he approached. "Dr. Jennings," he said formally, the use of her title immediately putting her on alert. "Sheriff Dawson has some questions for you." Dawson removed his hat, looking uncomfortable. "Madam, there's been some trouble in Johnson City. Mayor Peterson's young son is gravely ill. Same symptoms his mother had before she passed." Zara's heart sank. "I'm sorry to hear that. Has the town sent for a doctor from Austin?" "They tried," Dawson replied. "There's been flooding along the main road. No one can get through for at least 3 days." "And the boy doesn't have 3 days," Preston finished. Understanding dawned. "You want me to come back and treat him?" Dawson nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "The mayor's desperate. He's willing to set aside his feelings about what happened before." "How generous of him," Zara said coolly. "And if the boy dies despite my best efforts, will I be run out of town again, or worse?" Preston stepped forward. "That won't happen. I've made certain guarantees to the sheriff about your safety." The protective note in his voice warmed her despite the circumstances. "The boy is only 8, Dawson added, a plea in his voice. "Whatever happened with his mother, he's innocent." Zara had never been one to refuse medical aid to anyone in need, regardless of personal feelings. "I'll come," she said. "Let me gather my supplies." As she turned to go inside, Preston caught her arm gently. "I'm coming with you," he said, his voice low and firm. "You don't have to, I do." His eyes held hers, brooking no argument. "We leave in 15 minutes. The ride to Johnson City was tense. Zara sat beside Preston in his wagon, her medical supplies secure in the back. Sheriff Dawson and his deputies rode ahead, perhaps to prepare the town for her return. "What guarantee did you make the sheriff?" Zara asked as they neared the town. Preston kept his eyes on the road. "That any harm that came to you would be answered for." "That sounds like a threat." "It was meant to." Zara studied his profile, the determined set of his jaw. "You barely know me, Preston. Why risk your standing with the town for my sake?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, so softly she almost missed it, he said, "I know enough." They arrived in Johnson City just after noon. The town looked much as it had when Zara left, though the faces that turned to watch her pass were more subdued than angry this time. News of the mayor's son had clearly spread, along with the knowledge that she was their only hope. The mayor's house sat at the end of the main street, a handsome two-story home that reflected his status in the community. As Preston helped Zara down from the wagon, the front door opened, and Mayor Peterson himself appeared, a tall, gaunt man whose grief had aged him considerably since Zara had last seen him. "Dr. Jennings," he acknowledged stiffly. "Thank you for coming." She nodded, professional despite the churning in her stomach. "Where is your son?" "Upstairs, first door on the right." Preston moved to follow her inside, but the mayor blocked his path. "Just the doctor." "I go where she goes," Preston stated, his hand resting casually near his holstered gun. Mayor Peterson looked like he might argue but thought better of it. "Fine. But don't touch anything." The boy, William, lay in a small bed, his face flushed with fever and his breathing labored. A woman Zara recognized as the mayor's sister sat beside him, applying cool cloths to his forehead. "How long has he been ill?" Zara asked, immediately setting down her bag and moving to examine the child. 3 days, the sister replied. "It started with a cough, then the fever came yesterday." Zara listened to the boy's chest, frowning at the rattling sound in his lungs. She checked his throat, his pulse, the glands in his neck. All the while, Preston stood silently by the door, his presence a comfort she hadn't realized she needed. "It's pneumonia," she finally announced. "Severe, but not yet desperate if we act quickly." Relief and fear mingled on the mayor's face. "Can you help him?" "Yes," Zara said with more confidence than she felt. "But I'll need to stay with him at least through the night. The next 24 hours will be critical." Mayor Peterson nodded. "Whatever you need." Zara sent the sister to boil water for a steam treatment and began preparing medicines from her bag. As she worked, she was acutely aware of Preston watching her, not with doubt, but with something that looked remarkably like pride. The hours that followed were a blur of activity. Zara administered herbal preparations to reduce the fever and ease the boy's breathing. She used mustard plasters on his chest and kept him hydrated with small sips of water and broth. Through it all, Preston remained sometimes in the room, sometimes in the hallway, but always within earshot. By midnight, William's fever had broken and his breathing had eased considerably. Zara allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism as she checked his pulse again. "He's going to be all right, isn't he?" The mayor's voice came from the doorway, where he stood watching his son. "I believe so," Zara replied. "The worst has passed, but he'll need careful attention for several more days." Mayor Peterson entered the room fully, his eyes on his sleeping son. "I was wrong about you," he said after a long moment. "About what happened to Margaret, Doc Williams left notes. I found them after you left. He'd written that her case was hopeless before you ever arrived." Zara said nothing, letting him continue. "I was angry," he admitted. "I needed someone to blame. You were an easy target, a woman doing a man's job, new to town with no connections." "I understand grief, Mayor Peterson," Zara said quietly. "But your actions cost me my home and my practice. I know." He looked up at her, genuine remorse in his eyes. I can never make that right, but the town needs a doctor and you've proven yourself tonight if you wanted to come back. The offer hung in the air between them. 6 months ago, it would have been everything Zara wanted: validation, acceptance, a chance to build the practice she'd dreamed of. Now, she thought of Quinn Ranch, of Miguel's kindness, of the patients who trusted her, of morning coffee in a sunlit kitchen, of storm cloud eyes that saw her value when no one else did. "Thank you," she said sincerely, "but I have a practice now, one where I'm respected and needed." Mayor Peterson nodded, disappointment and understanding mingling in his expression. "Quinn's a good man, better than most of us, it seems." Zara's eyes drifted to the hallway, where Preston stood in quiet vigilance. "Yes," she agreed softly. "He is." William continued to improve through the night and into the morning. By noon the following day, he was awake and asking for food, a sure sign of recovery. Zara left detailed instructions with the mayor's sister for his continued care and prepared to depart. The town had undergone a remarkable transformation in its attitude toward her. People stopped her on the street to apologize or thank her for coming back to help. The general store owner pressed a bag of candy into her hands, refusing payment. Even Sheriff Dawson seemed genuinely contrite about his role in her expulsion. As Preston loaded her medical bag into the wagon, Mrs. Thompson, whose baby Zara had delivered months earlier, approached with her healthy infant. "He's beautiful," Zara said, admiring the chubby-cheeked boy. "Thanks to you," Mrs. Thompson replied. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up when they made you leave. My husband was afraid of losing business." "It's all right," Zara assured her. "Things have worked out for the best." At Quinn Ranch, Mrs. Thompson's eyes twinkled with knowing interest. "The whole town's talking about how he stood up for you. They say he hasn't taken an interest in anything but ranching and ranger work since he came back from the war." Before Zara could respond, Preston appeared beside her. Ready to go, the ride back to the ranch was quieter than the journey to town, but it was a comfortable silence. Zara felt a weight had been lifted, the lingering sense of injustice that had shadowed her since being forced from Johnson City. "Thank you," she said as the ranch came into view, "for coming with me, for making sure they treated me fairly." Preston's hands tightened on the reins momentarily. "You didn't need me there. You proved yourself on your own." "Perhaps," she conceded, "but it meant something, having you believe in me from the start." He glanced at her, those storm cloud eyes softening. "You make it easy to believe in you, Zara." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a warm current through her body. As they pulled up to the ranch house, Miguel rushed out to meet them, concern evident on his weathered face. "Gracias a Dios. When we heard you had gone back to that town." "We're fine, Miguel," Preston assured him, jumping down from the wagon and coming around to help Zara descend. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "The mayor's son will recover," Zara added, "and I think relations with the town may improve now." Miguel muttered something in Spanish that sounded suspiciously like "they'd better," before ushering them inside for a late lunch. Life at Quinn Ranch settled into a rhythm after that. Zara's practice grew, with patients coming from as far as 20 miles away. Preston expanded the office, adding a second examination room and a small surgery. He even hired a young woman from town, Zara Jennings, to assist Zara and learn basic medical skills. As autumn deepened toward winter, Zara found herself increasingly aware of Preston's presence, the way he sought her company in the evenings, how his eyes followed her when she moved about a room, the careful distance he maintained even as something unspoken grew between them. One crisp November evening she found him on the porch, staring at the sunset with a troubled expression. "Penny for your thoughts," she asked, joining him at the railing. He glanced at her, a small smile touching his lips. Wouldn't be worth it. I'll be the judge of that. She bumped his shoulder gently with her own, a familiarity that would have been unthinkable months ago. Preston hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded telegram. Ranger headquarters wants me in Austin next week. There's a gang causing trouble near the border. They're asking for experienced men. How long would you be gone? Zara tried to keep her voice neutral, though the thought of his absence created a hollow feeling in her chest. Hard to say. Weeks, maybe months. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. I'm considering turning them down. Why? Zara asked, though her heart raced with implications. Preston turned to face her fully, those storm cloud eyes more intense than she'd ever seen them. I think you know why, Zara. The air between them seemed to still, charged with possibility. Zara took a steadying breath. I need to hear you say it. For a man of few words, the request clearly challenged him, but Preston Quinn had never backed down from a challenge. I don't want to leave because of you, he said simply. Because when you're not here, this place doesn't feel like home anymore. The admission, so plainly stated yet so profound, took her breath away. Preston, you don't have to say anything, he interrupted, misreading her reaction. I know your work is important to you, I respect that. I just wanted to be honest about why I'm staying. I wasn't going to ask you to stay, Zara said softly, though I'm glad you are. Hope flickered in his eyes. You are. Instead of answering with words, Zara took a step closer and placed her hand over his on the railing. His skin was warm despite the cool evening air. This place has become home to me too, she confessed. But it's not the ranch or the practice or even Miguel's excellent cooking. A smile tugged at her lips. It's you, Preston. The way you see me not as a woman trying to be a doctor, but as a doctor who happens to be a woman. Preston's free hand came up to touch her cheek, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. I see a lot more than that, Zara. Time seemed suspended as they stood there, the tension of months finally finding release in this quiet moment of honesty. Then, with deliberate slowness, Preston leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tentative at first, as if he expected her to pull away. When she didn't win, instead, she leaned into him and slid her arms around his neck. It deepened into something more certain, more passionate. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Preston rested his forehead against hers. I should have done that a long time ago. Yes, she agreed with a smile. You should have. He laughed then, a rich sound she'd rarely heard from him. Always direct, Dr. Jennings. Always, she promised, rising on her toes to kiss him again. They were interrupted by Miguel clearing his throat pointedly from the doorway. Dinner is served, he announced, though the broad grin on his face suggested he wasn't sorry at all for what he'd witnessed. Preston kept his arm around Zara's waist as they followed Miguel inside, a public declaration of what had changed between them. Word spread quickly about the relationship between the taciturn rancher and the lady doctor. Most reactions were positive. The ranch hands had long suspected their boss's feelings, and Zara's patients seemed delighted by the development. Johnson City's response was more mixed. Some, like Mayor Peterson and Mrs. Thompson, sent notes of congratulation. Others muttered about impropriety, though none dared say so to Preston's face. As Christmas approached, Preston surprised Zara by taking her to San Antonio for a proper dinner and a visit to the theater. She wore her finest dress, a deep green velvet that had rarely seen use at the ranch, and he appeared in a formal suit that transformed him from rugged rancher to distinguished gentleman. Over dinner at the city's finest restaurant, Preston seemed unusually nervous, fidgeting with his silverware and twice losing the thread of conversation. "Is something wrong?" Zara finally asked, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Preston looked at her, those storm cloud eyes full of emotion. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, in fact, for the first time in years." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, placing it on the table between them. "I had planned a speech," he admitted, "about how you've changed my life, brought light back into my home, but I think you know all that." Zara's heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at the box. "I love you, Zara," Preston said, the words simple but profound, coming from a man who measured each one carefully. "I want to build a life with you, not just as partners in the ranch and your practice, but as husband and wife." With slightly trembling fingers, he opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a single perfect diamond. "Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Zara's eyes, blurring her vision. "Yes," she whispered, then more firmly, "Yes, Preston, I love you too." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then leaned across the table to kiss her, heedless of the other diners who broke into spontaneous applause around them. They were married on New Year's Day, 1877, in the parlor of Quinn Ranch. The house was decorated with evergreen boughs and winter berries, and a fire blazed in the hearth to ward off the January chill. Miguel, beaming with pride, gave Zara away, while ranch hands and their families filled the room to witness the union. To everyone's surprise, much of Johnson City turned out as well. Mayor Peterson came with young William, now fully recovered and fascinated by the lady doctor who had saved his life. Sheriff Dawson stood awkwardly near the back, his hat in his hands. Even the mercantile owner who had once refused to sell Zara medical supplies brought a wedding gift of fine linens. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Zara wore a cream-colored dress with lace at the collar and cuffs, and Preston looked handsome in his best suit, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion. They wrote their own vows, his brief but heartfelt, hers eloquent and moving, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up seemed to shake the rafters. The celebration continued well into the evening, with music and dancing and enough food to feed an army. As darkness fell and guests began to depart, Preston found Zara standing on the porch, looking out at the star-filled Texas sky. "Any regrets, Mrs. Quinn?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Zara leaned back against him, savoring the solid warmth of his chest. "Not one," she replied truthfully. "Though I do wonder sometimes what would have happened if the town hadn't tried to run me out that night." Preston tightened his embrace. "I'd have found you eventually," he said with quiet certainty. "Some things are meant to be." She turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to trace the scar along his jaw. "The silent cowboy and the lady doctor." "Exactly." He captured her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Though I'm not so silent anymore, thanks to you." "A miracle indeed," she teased, rising on her toes to kiss him. Later that night, in the privacy of their bedroom, no longer separate spaces but a shared sanctuary, Zara lay in her husband's arms, tracing idle patterns on his chest. "What are you thinking?" Preston asked, his voice a low rumble beneath her ear. "That I never expected this," she admitted. "When I came west, I thought I was choosing medicine over family life. I never imagined I could have both." Preston's hand moved in slow circles on her back. "You deserve both and more, as do you." She propped herself up to look at him. "You know, you never told me the full story of why you left the Rangers." A shadow crossed his face, but he didn't look away. "It was after Gettysburg," he said quietly. "I was tracking a gang that had been robbing stage coaches near the Mexican border. I cornered them in a small town, but things went wrong. There was a shootout. A young boy was caught in the crossfire." Zara's heart ached for him. "Was he killed?" "No," Preston swallowed hard, but he lost his leg because of a bullet from my gun. Oh, Preston." Zara laid her hand against his cheek. "It was an accident. I know that now, but at the time." He shook his head. "I couldn't wear the star anymore, not after that, so I came home, buried myself in ranch work, and tried to forget." "Is that why you stood up for me?" "Because you understand what it's like to be blamed for something beyond your control." Preston considered this. "Perhaps, but it was more than that. When I saw you that night, facing down the town alone, I saw someone with the same kind of courage I used to believe in. Someone worth standing beside." The honest admission moved her deeply. "Thank you for telling me. No more secrets between us," he promised. "Not ever." As they drifted toward sleep in each other's arms, Zara reflected on the strange path that had led her here, from Boston to Denver to Johnson City, and finally to Quinn Ranch. To Preston. Sometimes the worst moments in life led to the greatest joys, if one had the courage to keep moving forward. Spring brought new beginnings to Quinn Ranch. Zara's practice flourished, with patients now coming from as far as Austin for her unique treatments. Preston expanded the ranch operations, buying additional land and cattle with an eye toward building a legacy. In late March, as wildflowers carpeted the Texas hills in a riot of color, Zara made a discovery that would change their lives forever. She confirmed it twice before sharing the news with Preston one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "I have something to tell you," she said, trying to keep her voice casual despite the excitement bubbling inside her. Preston looked at her, one eyebrow raised. "Should I be worried? You've had that secret smile all day." "Not worried," she assured him, taking his hand and placing it gently against her still flat stomach. "Hopeful." It took him a moment to understand. When he did, his eyes widened, and for once, the taciturn Preston Quinn was rendered completely speechless. "Are you certain?" he finally managed, his voice rough with emotion. Zara nodded. "Due in October by my calculations, just in time for Harvest Festival." Preston gathered her in his arms so suddenly she gasped, but his embrace was gentle despite his enthusiasm. "A baby," he murmured against her hair. "Our baby." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and summer. Zara continued her medical practice, though Preston insisted she take on fewer patients and rest more frequently. She compromised by training Zara Jennings to handle more responsibilities, preparing for the time when she would need to step back temporarily. The entire ranch seemed to rally around their expecting doctor. Miguel cooked special nutrient-rich meals. The ranch hands built an elaborate cradle, and even Johnson City sent gifts for the coming child, a peace offering of sorts for their past treatment of Zara. As her body changed and the baby grew, Zara found herself marveling at how completely her life had transformed in just 1 year. From homeless and practice, less to married, respected, and expecting a child, all because one silent cowboy had decided she was worth fighting for. On a crisp October morning, with the first hint of autumn in the air, Zara Quinn gave birth to a healthy son. Preston paced outside the bedroom where Zara Jennings and Miguel's wife attended her, his normally stoic face etched with concern. When the baby's first cry pierced the air, he stopped mid-stride, his hand reaching for the doorknob before he could think better of it. Miguel, who had been keeping him company, nodded encouragingly. "Go, senor, meet your son." Preston entered the room to find Zara propped up on pillows, her hair damp with perspiration but her face glowing with exhaustion and joy. In her arms was a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Come meet him," she said softly. Preston approached the bed with uncharacteristic hesitation, overwhelmed by the moment. As he sat beside his wife, she carefully transferred the newborn into his arms. The baby was tiny but perfect, with a shock of dark hair and his father's strong jawline. As Preston cradled him, the infant opened his eyes, not the blue of most newborns, but a stormy gray that mirrored his own. "Hello, son," Preston whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Zara watched them together, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain. "What shall we call him?" They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one, wanting to meet their child first. Preston studied the small face. "James," he said after a moment, "after your father." Tears sprang to Zara's eyes at the thoughtful gesture. "James Quinn. It's perfect." "James Preston Quinn," she amended, reaching out to touch the baby's cheek. "A good, strong name for a good, strong boy." Life with a newborn brought challenges neither of them had anticipated, despite Zara's medical knowledge. James proved to be a colicky baby, often crying through the night despite their best efforts to soothe him. To everyone's surprise, it was Preston who developed the most effective technique for calming the infant. He would carry James out onto the porch, regardless of the hour, and walk slowly back and forth, pointing out stars and speaking to him in a low, steady voice about ranch matters, as if the baby were a small business partner. "He's explaining cattle breeding to a 3-week-old," Zara told Miguel one morning after finding them both asleep in the rocking chair, James finally peaceful on his father's chest. Miguel smiled knowingly. "The words matter less than the voice, Senora. The little one knows his father's heart." As James grew from infant to toddler, the Quinn Ranch continued to prosper. Zara resumed her full medical practice when James was 6 months old, with Zara Jennings now a capable assistant. Preston expanded the ranch's operations to include horse breeding, developing a line of sturdy, intelligent mounts that quickly gained reputation throughout Texas. On James's first birthday, they hosted a celebration that brought together ranch hands, patients, and townspeople in a display of community that would have seemed impossible 2 years earlier. As Zara watched her son now walking with determined if wobbly steps being doted on by Mayor Peterson, while Preston chatted amicably with Sheriff Dawson, she marveled at how completely their world had changed. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Preston asked later that evening, finding her on their porch after they'd put James to bed. "I was just thinking about the night we met," Zara replied, leaning into him as he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "How different everything might have been if you hadn't been on that road." Preston considered this. "I wasn't supposed to be there, you know. I was heading to Austin that day, but something made me turn back early." "Divine intervention," she teased gently. "Maybe." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Or maybe just good fortune. Either way, I thank God every day for it." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening Texas sky. Their life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, disagreements, difficult days. But they faced them together, the taciturn rancher and his doctor wife, building something neither had expected to find. "I love you, Preston Quinn," Zara said softly, turning in his arms to face him. Those storm cloud eyes, once so guarded, now looked at her with open adoration. "And I love you, Zara Quinn, more than I have words to say." "That's all right," she replied with a smile, rising on her toes to kiss him. "Some things don't need words." As the years passed, the Quinn family grew. 2 years after James came a daughter, Elizabeth, with her mother's chestnut hair and her father's quiet determination. 3 years later, twin boys Michael and Robert completed their family, bringing equal measures of joy and chaos to the ranch. Zara's medical practice expanded to include a small hospital wing, where she trained several young women in nursing and basic medical care. Her reputation spread throughout Texas, and she occasionally traveled to medical conferences, always returning with new knowledge to improve her patients' care. Preston continued to serve as a Texas Ranger when needed, though he was more selective about the assignments he accepted, preferring to stay close to his family. Under his guidance, Quinn Ranch became one of the most respected operations in the state, known for fair treatment of workers and progressive ranching methods. Johnson City eventually elected Zara to its town council, an irony not lost on anyone who remembered her expulsion years earlier. From this position, she advocated for better health care, education, and opportunities for women throughout the region. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Preston surprised Zara with a trip back to Boston, where she showed him the neighborhood of her childhood and visited her parents' graves. It was a healing journey for both of them, a chance to connect their past with their present and future. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. Their children grew up knowing how a town's prejudice and a silent cowboy's stand had brought their parents together. "She stays here with me," Preston would say when he reached that part of the story, always looking at Zara with the same intensity as on that moonlit road decades earlier. And Zara would smile, reaching for his hand across whatever distance separated them. "Best decision I ever made," she would reply, "staying with you." In the autumn of their lives, as grandchildren played in the yard of Quinn Ranch, and the next generation began to take over its operations, Preston and Zara could often be found on their porch, watching the Texas sunset together. Their hair had silvered, their faces had lined with the passage of time, but the bond between them remained undiminished. "Any regrets?" Preston would sometimes ask, echoing his question from their wedding night, and Zara's answer was always the same: "Not one, not ever." For the woman who had once been driven from her home and the silent cowboy who had stood for her when no one else would, life had come full circle from strangers on a dark road to partners in all things. Their love story, born of prejudice and courage, had become a testament to the power of standing firm for what is right, for those who deserve a chance, for the ones who capture our hearts. And in Johnson City, long after both had passed, people still told the tale of the lady doctor and the taciturn ranger, how a town's mistake had led to an unlikely love that changed them all for the better.